Some of China's artificial islands in the West Philippine Sea fired flares several times, just as the Philippine Coast Guard kept a close eye from the sky.
Thank you, sir.
The plane banked left, and the journalists saw them below. 3 white ships, Chinese Coast Guard, moving slowly through blue-green water, circling the island like wolves circling a campfire. Then the radio crackled, a voice in accented English, calm but firm, telling the pilot to turn around. That this was Chinese waters. That this plane had no right to be here. The pilot kept flying. The island below, a 37-hectare tadpole of sand, coral, and stubborn Filipino life, is called Pagasa. In Tagalog, it means hope. And on April 9th, 2026, the Philippine Coast Guard stood on that island and unveiled something that Beijing will not easily forget. The first dedicated Coast Guard command center in the Spratly Islands. A new headquarters, a new district, a new message. You are not moving us. Every day, our villagers see Chinese Coast Guard and militia ships all around the island. This new Coast Guard District Command is a big morale booster for them. MP Albeda, Vice Mayor, Kalayan. To understand why this matters, you have to understand where Pagasa sits. It is 500 kilometers west of Palawan, the nearest major Philippine island. It is hours away from help. It sits inside a web of overlapping claims from China, Vietnam, Taiwan, Malaysia, and Brunei. And it lies at the heart of the South China Sea, a body of water through which roughly $3 to $5 trillion in trade passes every year. Every container ship from Singapore to Seoul, every oil tanker from the Gulf to Japan, every cargo vessel feeding the factories of East Asia, they all pass through this water. Whoever controls the South China Sea doesn't just control fish or oil. They control the circulatory system of the global economy. China knows this. It has known it for decades, which is why what happened on April 9th, 2026, on that small, warm, coral-fringed island, is not a local story. It is a global one. The new headquarters is the nerve center of a freshly established Coast Guard district, the Coast Guard District Kalayan Island Group. Formerly, this entire 68,000 square kilometer stretch of water was overseen from Palawan, hundreds of kilometers away. That was always a weakness. Beijing strategists noted it. Now, for the first time, there will be a Commodore-level commander on the island itself, a permanently stationed Coast Guard vessel. More response boats, more specialists, more eyes. The plans go further. Manila intends to dredge a deeper port. Currently, personnel have to be ferried ashore by small boats, a vulnerability that made every resupply mission an adventure. The far-flung outposts at Kota Island and Parola Island will see their tiny substations upgraded to full station status. There will be more teachers for the island's school, more doctors, better services for the 400 or so Filipinos, fishermen, their wives, their children, who live on Pagasa and whom China officially describes as illegal settlers. That framing tells you everything about Beijing's worldview. In China's telling, A Filipino child doing homework on an island her family has lived on for decades is committing a violation of sovereignty. A Filipino grandmother growing vegetables in a plot of soil on Pagasa is an act of aggression. Manila has a different word for it: life. The Philippines is not fighting with warships. It is fighting with Coast Guard vessels, international law, and the quiet, stubborn presence of human beings living ordinary lives in extraordinary places. This base did not appear from nowhere. It is the product of years of pressure, coercion, and calculated harassment that has defined Chinese behavior in these waters. The pattern is familiar by now. Chinese Coast Guard vessels spraying water cannons at Philippine supply boats. Maritime militia ships forming walls across resupply routes. Military-grade lasers pointed at Philippine sailors. The ramming of hulls. The cutting of tow lines. The confiscation of equipment. In 2024, things crossed a new threshold. Chinese vessels rammed Philippine naval boats near Second Thomas Shoal, not once, but repeatedly, while armed Chinese sailors issued direct threats. Navy on Navy. Not Coast Guard, not militia. Uniformed military personnel pointing weapons at Filipino sailors in what Manila considers its own waters. On August 11, 2025, it escalated again. Both the Chinese Navy and the Chinese Coast Guard conducted a coordinated operation near Scarborough Shoal, firing water cannons and executing a joint ramming maneuver against the Philippine Coast Guard vessel Suluan. Two arms of the Chinese state, acting together, attacking a single Philippine ship.
MRRV 9701, we have medical personnel on board.
Throughout 2025, China's maritime militia was more active than at any previous point on record. Satellite imagery showed hundreds of vessels deployed daily near the most sensitive features, almost half of all militia activity concentrated around Mischief Reef and Whitsun Reef, right at the edge of Philippine-occupied territory. And then, there is Antelope Reef. In October 2025, Beijing quietly began dredging at Antelope Reef in the Paracel Islands. By January 2026, satellite images from companies like Planet Labs and Vantor showed something extraordinary. Where there was once barely a sandbar, there was now a growing island. By March 2026, the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative at CSIS estimated the reclaimed land at roughly 6.11 square kilometers, nearly as large as Mischief Reef, China's current largest outpost in the entire South China Sea. This is the first significant island building China has undertaken since 2017. It comes at a moment when American reconnaissance flights over the South China Sea dropped sharply. From 102 flights between December 2025 and January 2026, down to just 72 in February 2026, as Washington's attention was consumed by the Iran war. China noticed the gap and filled it. A MTI analysis suggests Antelope Reef could eventually host a 2,743-meter runway, similar to the ones already built at Woody Island, Mischief Reef, Subi Reef, and Fiery Cross Reef. Analysts note the lagoon could harbor submarines and large Coast Guard vessels. More than 50 small structures are already visible, along with a helipad, jetties, and the foundations of larger buildings. Beijing's foreign ministry called it routine construction to improve living conditions. The satellite images disagree. Here is where the Philippines has played a clever hand. The new base on Pagasa is not a military installation. It belongs to the Coast Guard, a civilian maritime law enforcement agency. This distinction is not bureaucratic, it is strategic. Under international law, Coast Guard operations sit in a different category from military operations. They are harder to characterize as provocations, harder to justify escalating against, harder to frame as acts of aggression. When China attacks a Philippine Coast Guard vessel, it is attacking a civilian law enforcement ship. When China harasses a Philippine supply mission to a Coast Guard outpost, it is interfering with civilian maritime administration. That framing matters in courts. It matters in press conferences. It matters in the conversations Manila is having with its allies. The Philippines has also been waging what you might call a paper war, a battle of names and maps and administrative facts. Last month, Manila announced plans to rename more than 100 island features in the Spratlys, giving them official Filipino names and formally incorporating them into Philippine administrative geography. China immediately accused Manila of breaking international law and threatened unspecified consequences. But Manila's move is legally shrewd. Every renamed feature, every new administrative district, every census form filled out by a Filipino family on Pagasa is what legal scholars call constructive sovereignty, the accumulation of documentary proof of governance. The Philippines is building a legal record, brick by brick, name by name, census by census. And it is doing it in plain sight. The renaming of reefs, the opening of Coast Guard districts, the filing of school records for island children, these are not symbolic gestures. They are legal arguments, filed in the court of international opinion. The Philippines is not doing this alone. In February 2026, the United States committed an additional $144 million for infrastructure under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, a deal that gives American forces access to 9 military sites across the Philippines. The National Defense Authorization Act for 2026 authorized up to $2.5 billion in foreign military financing for Manila. Just 5 years ago, had one of the most under-equipped militaries in Southeast Asia. The U.S. is funding and building a boat maintenance facility on Palawan's western coast, just 160 miles east of Second Thomas Shoal, designed to get Philippine vessels back into the water within 15 minutes of an emergency. 15 minutes. That is not a training facility. That is a rapid response infrastructure designed for exactly the kind of sudden escalation that has become a weekly occurrence in these waters. The Typhoon mid-range missile system, deployed to the Philippines in 2024 and again during exercises in 2025, remains a source of open alarm in Beijing. China has publicly called it the start of a regional arms race. The fact that China is alarmed suggests the weapon is doing its job. And then, there is Balikatan 2026. Starting April 20, just 11 days from now, the Philippines and the United States will hold their largest joint military exercise ever. But this year is different. For the first time since the Second World War, Japanese combat troops will set foot on Philippine soil. Not observers, not logistics personnel, combat-capable units of Japan's self-defense forces, carrying weapons, running drills alongside American and Filipino soldiers. 81 years since Imperial Japan occupied the Philippines, Japanese soldiers are returning. This time, they are coming as allies. The symbolism is almost too large to contain. The broader coalition forming around the South China Sea is something Beijing would not have predicted a decade ago.
Reiterated the Philippines and Japan's shared commitment to upholding the rules-based order governed by international law.
Japan finalized a mutual defense agreement with the Philippines in September 2025, the most significant step in Japanese military engagement with Southeast Asia in the post-war era. France has been running joint naval patrols with the U.S. 7th Fleet in the Philippine Sea since 2024, a European power-projecting force into what was once considered an exclusively American lake. Australia has deepened its role in Balikatan exercises. Canada signed a new visiting forces agreement with Manila. Vietnam, meanwhile, no friend of China despite its communist government, has dredged approximately 13.4 square kilometers of coral reef across its own Spratly outpost since 2022, framing the work explicitly as a response to Chinese expansion. One by one, the nations of the Indo-Pacific are choosing sides. Not loudly, not through formal alliances, but through exercises, agreements, port calls, and infrastructure deals. The architecture of deterrence is being built, one bilateral agreement at a time. Beijing has a strategy. It has been consistent, patient, and largely successful for the past 15 years. The gray zone. It means doing things that are aggressive enough to intimidate, but not so aggressive as to trigger a military response. Ramming ships rather than shooting at them. Deploying Coast Guard rather than Navy. Jamming communications rather than destroying equipment. The goal is to exhaust the opponent, change facts on the ground, and establish a new normal, all without crossing the threshold that would activate Article 4 of the U.S.-Philippines Mutual Defense Treaty. For years, it worked. Philippine ships turned back, resupply missions were blocked. Chinese infrastructure on disputed reefs grew. The world watched and took notes and issued statements. But something has shifted. Under President Marcos Jr., the Philippines introduced what it calls the Transparency Initiative, openly documenting every Chinese harassment incident, publishing videos of water cannon attacks, releasing satellite images of Chinese militia ships. Where previous administrations kept incidents quiet to avoid embarrassing Beijing, this one turns every confrontation into international news. It has worked. The footage of Chinese water cannons hitting Philippine supply boats played on television screens around the world. It played in Washington. It played in Tokyo. It played in Brussels. It changed the political calculus for governments that might otherwise have remained neutral. Beijing is now stuck. Its gray zone tactics, which were designed to be deniable, are being documented in high resolution and broadcast globally. Every escalation it undertakes now costs more diplomatically than it gains strategically. Three futures are possible. None of them are comfortable. The first is managed tension. The new Coast Guard base becomes normalized. China protests, postures, sends ships to circle the island. Manila ignores the warnings and keeps building. The standoff continues, dangerous, tense, but controlled. This has been the pattern for years. It may continue. The second is a Chinese countermove. Beijing responds to the new base with something of its own, a new installation on a nearby feature, an expanded militia presence, a systematic blockade of Pagasa's resupply routes. This would force Manila to choose, back down, or escalate. It would force Washington to choose, honor the Mutual Defense Treaty, or not. The third is miscalculation, a collision, an injury, a death. Neither side intends a war, but intentions are not always enough. The South China Sea is a crowded space full of fast-moving vessels, charged atmospheres, and commanders making split-second decisions with inadequate communication. One mistake, one ship that turns the wrong way, one sailor who opens fire when he shouldn't, and the treaty gets invoked. The region holds its breath. The world holds its breath. That is the most dangerous scenario of all. A China that decides time is running out. The most dangerous moment in any arms race is not when one side is stronger. It is when one side feels it is about to lose its advantage. Come back to the image at the beginning. A journalist on a plane. Chinese ships below. A radio warning in English. The pilot keeping course. The Philippines opened a Coast Guard base anyway. On 37 hectares of sand and coral and stubbornness, somewhere between the Philippines and Vietnam and China and the deep blue sea, 400 people wake up every morning and go about their lives. They fish. They teach their children. They grow food in small garden plots. They watch Chinese ships from their windows. And now, a Commodore of the Philippine Coast Guard sits in a new command center on that island, with a permanently stationed ship in the harbor and a mandate that could not be clearer. The defense of the Calayan Island Group is a top priority. There are bigger things happening in the world right now. A war in the Middle East, trade wars reshaping global supply chains, the great power competition playing out across technology, finance, and politics. It is easy to overlook a tiny island in the South China Sea. What happens on Pagasa Island is a test of something that matters far beyond its 37 hectares. It is a test of whether a small nation can use international law, civilian institutions, strategic alliances, and sheer human presence to hold its own against a country 30 times its size. It is a test of whether the rules-based international order, the system of laws and norms that has governed the seas since 1945, still means anything in the Indo-Pacific. It is a test of whether might makes right. The answer the Philippines gave today, on April 9, 2026, with a Coast Guard activation ceremony on a remote island that China says doesn't belong to it, was this: not yet. Not here. Not us. The island is small. The question it poses is enormous. And the answer to that question will define the Indo-Pacific, and quite possibly the world, for the next generation.